You can go through seasons in your life where you're not exactly sure what's going on, and it's easier to see it in hindsight, really, than it is while you're going through those particular challenges or seasons in your life. And I think that's been fairly self-evident in the past few months and the things that I've talked about with, the months in review. And they haven't all been released kind of in a timely fashion, but I'm looking to roll them out fairly quickly in the next little while. And I think honestly I'm excited about the direction that life is taking and how I can really feel energized and excited and full of life, really, in the face of challenges. Last year I had a similar kind of financial crisis as I'm sort of experiencing right now in my life, and I kind of went through it not in the best manner. I wasn't particularly happy. I was actually pretty miserable, honestly, and this time around I feel like I'm going through it with a better attitude. And I don't think I went through it with a terrible attitude last time, but it really kind of broke me last time in a couple ways that were rather unexpected. And one of those ways was just I thought that I didn't have a future in music. And that was a really difficult place to be and a difficult thing to admit. And it might not have even been true. And I think it wasn't true, is maybe what I'm trying to say ultimately. But, there were people in my life that lifted me up in times when things were difficult. And when you don't share your problem, your burden is all your own. Your burden is halved when you share it with others. And I've heard my mom say that before, and I really think that is true. But I think there is also something to going through seasons in your life with a good attitude. And it's not just about positive thinking, although that is kind of a big part of it. What is it that causes one to feel good, and how can you feel good all the time is kind of become a bit of a quest for me. And the reason for that is realizing what the sweet spot is all about. And a sweet spot for me is a combination of peak performance and also a feeling of exhilaration. And without those 2 points of convergence, it's impossible to create the type of productivity that I want. I think there really is something that happens when you are trusting and believing in faith and going on faith, and you're excited about it and you're feeling good and trusting God, and also producing and putting the work in at the same time. There's something magical and miraculous that happens when those 2 points come together. If you probably look back in your life, you can remember times when you weren't as productive as you'd like to be, simply because you weren't feeling good. And when you weren't feeling good that day, you were unfocused and you weren't able to carry through a task or a project without great effort because there was something else on your mind. You weren't thinking about the problem or the task at hand. And there's really something to be said about possibility thinking. And that's something I believe David J. Schwartz talks about in his book, The Magic of Thinking Big. Likewise, Robert Schuller talks about possibility thinking a lot. And when you really set your mind to those things, it's amazing the ideas that can come to you. Everything that you think or thought was maybe impossible in your life, if you begin to look at it, if you begin to apply possibility thinking in your life, it's really amazing the things that can come to you. So, I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of talking circles around myself, but it's really been an amazing month, the month of May, in the sense of growth and self-development. And I've kind of come to a bigger picture realization. And I've sort of had either the reputation and probably some proof to back up the fact that I'm a hard worker. Some people have even pointed that out on the podcast, and I'm always flattered. And it's not that at the end of the day, I'm human as well. So it doesn't mean that I don't have kind of my binges and spurts and that kind of thing. Video games and TV used to be kind of a bigger thing for me, and movies and that kind of thing. And those are, for me, just tools, I guess, for times of rest. But I don't really watch cable anymore, and I think you probably know that if you've heard me chat at all. I don't... it's very rare for me to go to a movie these days, and I'll watch the occasional DVD. And it's also a rarity for me to play games. Part of that is realizing the focus in my life and wanting to focus more on accomplishment, I guess. But life can't also be just about accomplishment, at least in the sense that usually that implies some sort of disorder within your personal life. And I'm not saying that it's a sickness or illness or mental health issue, but in your life you have a disorder. And I'm not suggesting unbalance either, because you can have unbalance in your life and be successful. But if you are just driven for accomplishment, oftentimes you are just trying to make up for something that happened early in your life. So you can't just be driven. That doesn't really seem to work all that well either. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I felt like I was a hard worker, and I did what I did fairly well. And I've recently sort of come to this grander realization that people that are generally successful in their chosen fields and tasks usually set their minds to think about what they do as a business. And that doesn't matter if it's blogging, some sort of upstart small business. It could even podcasting. It could really apply to anything that you start on your own. And so bringing consistency to the table really isn't a huge stretch when you begin to think about it in terms of a business. So let me put it this way. If you are producing YouTube videos and you want to make a future in that or monetize from it in some way, which I think is totally possible, it probably wouldn't be unreasonable for you to produce videos 5 days a week, or at least once a week. Something that's very consistent, predictable. Because I know the video example is maybe not the best because it takes a lot of time, but if you are blogging, then 5 days a week is probably not unreasonable, because you're treating it like a business. Any other business in this world basically operates on a 5 day a week type format. So likewise, you would also apply yourself in a 5 day a week format. And I realized that I haven't always done that. And that's maybe where some of my pitfalls or shortfalls have been in really achieving or accomplishing what I would like to and what I've been doing. As a creative person and a creative entrepreneur, I've actually experienced a great deal of struggle, really focusing and honing in on one particular thing. At the age of 17, I actually picked up the guitar and started learning it, and that's when I felt like I had found the one thing. And yet, somehow, my adult life, when I look back on it, has been kind of dominated by trying to make ends meet and trying to make things work for me on the side of music or guitar playing. So I think what I'm telling the world, telling the universe, telling God by doing that is saying, well, guitar playing is not enough, so therefore I need something else. And that, for me, is a very, very compelling thought, because every new thing that you add to the table, you are saying that the original idea or the two ideas or the three ideas that you're working on aren't good enough. And I really don't want to be saying that about any of the projects that I do. And yet, that's probably part of what the implication has been, that when I start something new every time, it has I'm devaluing or taking away from other projects unless my time is managed very well. And I think it's entirely possible to, for example, have a full-time job, a 9-to-5 job, Monday through Friday, and then have some other project on top of that. And I think in a way that almost takes the pressure off the project that you're starting, because you've basically saying that, no, okay, I'm working 9 to 5, I have the income and resources I need, and if you don't, you might want to streamline your life, like I'm thinking about doing. But your income's enough, and now it's enough to support whatever project, whatever business, whatever thing that you're starting on the side. And that's going to be a little bit easier to stay consistent, I think. And there's also what goes along with that, I feel, is a long-term mentality. We can't look at those things as being kind of a 1 year and try it out kind of project. I think there's a certain level of commitment, or just wanting to be or needing to be completely sold out to that project for the next 5 to 10 years. And this is exactly what I've been learning in my business training and in entrepreneurial training, is that a lot of successful people look at their businesses or projects that way. Robert Kiyosaki talks about some businesses that he started, and not all of them are massively successful, but the man is successful because he has had a few businesses that then turned into an asset into his life. In other words, an asset being something that pays out regardless of whether he applies and works himself or not. But it takes longer to do it. And for me, it's not such a huge mental leap, because if I were to drop everything I'm doing and go to school today and get a degree or something like that, it's going to take me 2 to 5 years. And so thinking about business or thinking about any project that way isn't too much of a stretch either. It's something I can commit to or dedicate myself to for 2 to 5 years. And that may or may not apply to some projects that one might undertake. For example, completing 30 art pieces need not take 2 to 5 years if that's your only project on the side or your only focus. And so just some of the things that I've been learning through my mentorship, which I hugely appreciate. I can't tell you how amazing that is, to be counseling with a mentor that understands your situation and gets you and challenges you on the right things. Being in that environment is so different than just hearing it on a tape or a CD. And you're listening to me right now, you would probably get a different experience if you were here sitting with me, actually listening to me in person, of what exactly it is I'm saying. And that is something that I have also come to the realization of. So I don't know if that sums up the month of May in any way, but those are some of the things and some of the thoughts that have crossed my mind, and which is ultimately going to mean some transition in my life, and I'm working on that. And I don't know exactly what that means for the future of the podcast. I basically, my way of thinking about it, and I'll get into it now, but I'll cover it in more detail later, which is basically that this is an ellipsis, not a period. In other words, it's a season in my life. For the next 2 to 5 years, I might place my focus elsewhere. And I'm going to come back to the things that were either in progress or unfinished, or however you want to look at it. In my mind, the podcast isn't done. It hasn't seen 2 to 5 years of very solid, consistent effort from me yet. And that's something I feel I could apply myself to do. But I don't want to constantly be fighting and struggling on the financial end either, and nor do I believe I will be. I believe I will be compensated for my work, and I believe everything that I touch is prospers. But at the same token, I may have to apply myself in another venture for 2 to 5 years to really get to where I want to go on a financial level as well. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what May has looked like.